What if the Great Pyramids of Giza were not built with ropes and ramps alone, but with a technology now lost, an ancient science so profound that even today it seems like magic? The question unsettles, because the pyramids are real. They are not myths or allegories, not stories preserved in scripture. They stand in the desert, stone upon stone, as they have for nearly 5,000 years. Their scale is staggering. 2.3 million blocks in the Great Pyramid alone, some weighing as much as 80 tons, each fitted with uncanny precision. Even with modern cranes and lasers, building a structure of this size and accuracy would be a monumental challenge. Yet the Egyptians, we are told, did it with copper chisels, wooden sledges, and sheer human labor. The orthodox story is plausible, but it leaves a residue of doubt. How were the blocks quarried with such precision? How were they transported across miles of desert? How were they lifted hundreds of feet into the air and set down so tightly that even today, a razor blade cannot slip between them? These questions haunt archaeologists and amateurs alike, not because there are no answers, but because the answers feel inadequate. Ramps miles long, armies of laborers, decades of toil. Possible, yes. But are they the whole truth? Here enters the forgotten technology hypothesis, the idea that the builders of the pyramids possessed methods or machines that we no longer understand. Not aliens, not sorcery, but human ingenuity, advanced in ways lost to time. Perhaps they harnessed forces of nature in ways we have forgotten. Perhaps they discovered materials or tools erased by centuries of sand and conquest. Perhaps their science, like Atlantis, burned brightly and then vanished, leaving only monuments as testimony. It is a tantalizing thought because it reframes the pyramids not as the peak of primitive effort, but as the tip of an iceberg of vanished knowledge. Instead of imagining endless lines of slaves dragging blocks in the sun, we imagine engineers wielding tools of copper and something else, something unrecorded, something revolutionary. Ropes and sledges alone seem unworthy of such grandeur. A forgotten technology feels fitting. And if true, the implications are profound. It would mean history is not a straight climb from ignorance to enlightenment, but a cycle of rises and losses. It would mean humanity has touched greatness before and let it slip away. The pyramids would not just be tombs or monuments, but messages in stone. We were more than you believe. We knew more than you remember. But even if forgotten technology was real, it need not be fantastical. It could be subtle. Ingenious systems of water and hydraulics, resonance and sound, alloys stronger than copper, mathematics that guided labor with uncanny precision. To us, such methods might seem miraculous. To them, they might have been ordinary craft, jealously guarded by priests and guilds, lost when dynasties fell. The premise, then, is not that the pyramids were built by extraterrestrials or sorcerers. It is that they were built by humans as brilliant as ourselves, perhaps more so in ways we no longer understand. If so, then the desert does not hold tombs. It holds evidence of an ancient science erased from memory. And this possibility lingers, not because it is proven, but because the stones themselves demand it. They rise against the sky, too perfect, too enduring, too immense to be dismissed as mere brute labor. They whisper that something more may have been at work, something clever, something forgotten. What if we rediscovered it? What if the lost technology of the pyramids could light our cities, shape our buildings, power our world? What if, hidden in plain sight, these monuments are not relics of death, but blueprints of possibility?
To grasp the mystery of the pyramids, one must first confront their numbers. Statistics are not poetry, but in the case of Giza, they verge on myth. The Great Pyramid of Khufu, the largest of the three, was originally 481 feet tall, a mountain of stone rising from the desert. For over 3,800 years, it held the record as the tallest structure in the world, unmatched until the spires of medieval cathedrals pierced the sky. But it is not only the height that astonishes, it is the mass. Over 2.3 million limestone and granite blocks form its bulk, weighing an estimated 6.5 million tons. Some blocks are modest, around 2.5 tons each, but others, particularly the granite beams above the King's Chamber, tip the scales at 50 to 80 tons apiece. Moving such stones today requires cranes and machinery. Moving them 4,500 years ago with copper tools and manpower is described by archaeologists as possible. But possible and plausible are not the same thing. Then there is the precision. The base of the Great Pyramid covers 13 acres and is nearly perfectly square. Its sides deviate from true cardinal alignment by less than 4 minutes of arc. The difference in length between the sides is mere inches. The joints between blocks are so tight that even today with modern blades, it is difficult to slip a sheet of paper between them. This is not crude stacking. It is engineering that borders on obsessive. Even the logistics defy comprehension. If 2.3 million blocks were placed over 20 years, the builders would have had to move, shape, and set one block every 2 minutes, working day and night without pause. Was such relentless efficiency possible with sledges, ramps, and sheer muscle? Egyptologists argue yes, citing organized labor in massive ramps of mud brick and limestone. But the sheer pace remains staggering. The stones themselves pose questions. Many were quarried miles away. The granite beams, some weighing as much as a diesel locomotive, came from Aswan, over 500 miles upriver. Transporting them required barges, yet steering 80-ton blocks down the Nile, then across the desert, then hoisting them hundreds of feet into the pyramid stretches belief. And still the precision persists. The King's Chamber is lined with granite, cut so smoothly that its flatness rivals machine work. The descending passage is aligned almost perfectly north-south, pointing toward the pole star. Ventilation shafts are angled with uncanny accuracy, lining up with specific stars in Orion and Sirius at the time of construction. This is astronomy as well as architecture, an integration of stone and sky that seems impossible without advanced mathematics and instruments. Critics of the impossible argument insist the Egyptians were simply brilliant, not magical. With enough laborers, ramps, sledges, and copper chisels, they say, the task can be explained. But even sympathetic archaeologists admit the evidence is incomplete. The ramps have left no definitive traces. The chisels seem too soft for granite, and the scale of logistics exceeds anything else attempted in the ancient world. And the question remains, why? Why build so large, so precise, so enduring? Tombs of later pharaohs were carved into cliffs, hidden in valleys. Why did Khufu choose to construct a stone mountain visible from miles, demanding resources on a scale unmatched in history? If brute force was enough, why cloak it in such perfection? Here is the idea of forgotten technology finds its foothold. The scale of the impossible begs for explanations beyond ramps and ropes. Maybe they had machines, pulleys, or alloys lost to time. Maybe they used principles of physics, hydraulics, leverage, resonance, applied with a mastery we cannot reconstruct. Perhaps they tapped into natural forces we no longer recognize. Whatever the truth, the statistics remain. A pyramid as tall as a skyscraper, built with millions of stones, aligned to the stars, raised by a civilization without wheels or iron. Even the most orthodox account leaves us marveling at the audacity of it. And that is the paradox. Whether or not forgotten technology was used, the pyramids themselves remain an impossible scale, a monument that should not exist, and yet does.
Archaeology, for all its mysteries, insists on restraint. When confronted with the Great Pyramids, scholars do not reach for magic or lost machines. They reach for what is known: stone, wood, copper, rope, sweat. To them, the pyramids are not impossible. They are improbable feats of organization, not miracles of forgotten science. The orthodox explanation begins with manpower.
Ancient Egypt was not a kingdom of slaves, as Hollywood once portrayed, but of farmers. When the Nile flooded each year, agricultural work paused. Pharaohs, wielding divine authority, redirected this idle workforce into national projects. Tens of thousands of men, well-fed and housed in nearby workers' villages, labored seasonally on the pyramids. Archaeological evidence supports this. Remains of bakeries, breweries, and barracks reveal a community of workers sustained by vast resources. These were not slaves whipped into submission. They were citizens serving their god-king. The quarrying of stone was straightforward, at least for limestone. Copper chisels and dolerite pounders broke the rock into blocks. Marks left on unfinished stones confirm this. Blocks were then loaded onto wooden sledges and dragged across packed tracts of sand. Wall paintings from tombs show precisely this: teams of men hauling statues on sledges while another man pours water onto the sand in front of them, reducing friction. A simple detail, but one that could transform impossible labor into manageable effort. Transporting blocks from distant quarries, like Aswan's granite, required the Nile. Archaeologists argue that barges carried the massive stones downstream to Giza, where canals and causeways may have brought them close to the site. Recent discoveries suggest that the Nile once flowed nearer to the pyramids, making this theory plausible. Then comes the great challenge: raising the blocks into position. Here, ramps take center stage. Scholars propose several possibilities. A straight ramp, miles long, gradually sloping up to the pyramid's summit. A zigzagging ramp wrapped around one face, or a spiral ramp coiling around the pyramid as it rose. Each theory has supporters, each has flaws. A straight ramp would require more material than the pyramid itself. A spiral ramp would obstruct precision alignment. None has left definitive traces, though remnants of ramps exist at other Egyptian sites. The placement of blocks shows skill as well as brute force. Workers leveled the bedrock foundation with astonishing accuracy, possibly using water-filled trenches to gauge flatness. Blocks were set in place with levers, nudged and adjusted until the joints were seamless. Copper tools were too soft for granite, but experiments show dolerite pounders could chip away given enough patience. In this view, the pyramid was not built with lost technology, but with persistence multiplied by thousands of hands. And the precision? Egyptologists point out that small errors accumulate over distance, but the Egyptians were masters of surveying. Using simple tools, the plumb bob, the leveling staff, the mercat, a kind of early sighting instrument, they could align structures with impressive accuracy. They tracked the stars, measured shadows, and translated celestial geometry into earthly architecture. To them, astronomy was not science, but religion. Aligning the pyramid with Orion or Sirius was an act of devotion, not a feat of engineering for its own sake. Taken together, the orthodox explanation is compelling. The pyramids required no lost machines, only organization, discipline, and time. A pharaoh's will, a nation's labor, and the patient accumulation of stone upon stone. What seems impossible to us, they argue was possible to them because they had what we lack: generations willing to devote lifetimes to a single project, and a worldview where eternity justified effort. Yet, cracks remain. No single ramp theory has been confirmed. The logistics of hauling 80-ton beams remain uncertain. Copper chisels explain limestone, but granite still strains belief. Even with thousands of workers, the pace required, one block set every 2 minutes for decades, feels almost inhuman. Orthodoxy solves much, but not all. Which is why the forgotten technology hypothesis persists.
Orthodoxy assures us that the pyramids were possible with tools we know, but the stones, aligned with the stars, whisper that something more might have been at work. Between ramps and resonance, chisels and mystery, lies the gap where doubt grows. Mainstream archaeology explains the pyramids with ramps, sledges, and manpower. Yet for many, that answer feels incomplete, like a puzzle forced together with missing pieces. The blocks are too heavy, the precision too fine, the logistics too staggering. The result is a lingering suspicion. Perhaps the Egyptians possessed tools or techniques that we no longer know. Not alien technology, not miracles, but human inventions, clever, effective, and now forgotten. The idea is not as far-fetched as it sounds. Human history is full of knowledge lost. The recipe for Roman concrete, able to withstand salt water for millennia, was forgotten for centuries. Greek fire, the Byzantine weapon that could burn even on water, remains a mystery. Damascus steel, famed for blades of extraordinary strength and sharpness, was lost until modern metallurgy painstakingly revived it. Why should Egypt be different? Perhaps they too had methods that vanished when dynasties fell and libraries burned. What might those tools have been? Some propose advanced levers and pulley systems, simple machines refined to a level beyond what we assume. Perhaps combinations of counterweights and cranes, using gravity itself to hoist stones skyward. Others suggest rolling devices, log-based cradles, or early forms of wheels, though the Egyptians are not known to have used the wheel for heavy transport. Could there have been a device now vanished, wood and rope decayed into dust, leaving no trace? Cutting the stone is another puzzle. Copper chisels are too soft for granite, yet the pyramid's inner chambers gleam with precision cuts. Did the Egyptians use alloys now lost, bronzes or meteoric irons harder than copper? Some claim tubular drills, evidenced by spiral tool marks, hint at machinery more advanced than copper alone could provide. Were they using abrasives with astonishing efficiency, or tools whose secrets are buried with them? Others imagine water as the tool. Hydraulic power, channeled through canals and basins, could have floated blocks closer to the site. Archimedes' screw would not be invented for centuries, but did the Egyptians discover similar principles? Some speculate that entire ramps of water and buoyancy may have helped raise stones, not brute strength, but the soft persistence of liquid force. The forgotten tools hypothesis thrives because it respects the Egyptians' genius. It does not reduce them to slaves dragging blocks across sand, but imagines them as engineers with knowledge suited to their world. Knowledge practical, efficient, and profound, but fragile in transmission. When their civilization declined, so too did their secrets. The pyramids endure, but the instructions are gone. Skeptics argue this is wishful thinking. If such tools existed, where are they? Why no drawings, no fragments, no clear records? The Egyptians recorded everything, from harvests to hymns, yet left no blueprint for pyramid building. But perhaps that is the point. Knowledge guarded by priesthoods, restricted to initiates, may never have been written down. Or perhaps it was, on papyrus, long since burned or decayed. Memory is fragile, even when carved in stone. There is another possibility. What if the tools were not material but conceptual? Lost mathematics, geometries, or methods of surveying that guided thousands of workers with astonishing precision. Knowledge can vanish as easily as wood. A formula forgotten is as invisible as a tool destroyed. The great library of Alexandria burned. What else was lost with it? The forgotten tools hypothesis is not about wild speculation. It is about humility. It admits that human history is not a smooth curve of progress, but a jagged line of discovery and amnesia. We have lost secrets before. We may have lost them at Giza. The pyramids might not be impossible. They may only be reminders that civilizations forget.
And so we stand in the desert, staring at stones set so tightly they defy the centuries. Were they lifted by ropes and sweat alone, or by hands wielding tools whose names we no longer know? Until proof emerges, the question endures. What did the Egyptians know that we do not?
If forgotten tools once existed, what if they were not physical machines, but forces of nature harnessed in ways we have lost? Among the most intriguing and controversial ideas is that the ancients may have used sound and vibration to move and shape stone. It sounds fantastical, yet echoes of the notion ripple across history and myth, suggesting a possibility just strange enough to linger. Sound is powerful. Modern science demonstrates that vibrations can shatter glass, levitate small objects, and even manipulate grains of sand into geometric patterns. Ultrasound carves kidney stones inside the body without a scalpel. Resonance can topple bridges, as in the famous case of the Tacoma Narrows. If we can harness these effects today, could the ancients have stumbled upon similar principles, not with electronics, but with resonance of drums, horns, or chanting? Legends hint at this. Tibetan monks are said to have used coordinated sound, trumpets, drums, and chanting to levitate stones for monastery construction. Though the accounts are anecdotal, they persist, suggesting that cultural memory may preserve a fragment of truth. In Egypt, too, myths speak of priests chanting spells that commanded stone, where these metaphors were distorted recollections of acoustic techniques. Some fringe researchers point to the unusual properties of the pyramids themselves. The chambers resonate at specific frequencies. The king's chamber, for instance, amplifies sound in ways that seem deliberate, as though designed not only for ritual, but for acoustics. Could the builders have understood resonance deeply enough to use it practically? Perhaps humming blocks into motion, not with magic, but with tuned frequencies. The granite used in the pyramids is rich in quartz, a mineral that vibrates under pressure. Quartz powers modern watches, oscillating at precise frequencies. Was it coincidence that the Egyptians chose such stone, or did they sense its properties? Theories suggest they might have used sound to reduce friction, or even to weaken the bonds of stone during cutting. With the right resonance, stone itself could sing, becoming easier to shape or shift. Skeptics, of course, dismiss this as pseudoscience. No evidence of acoustic machinery has been found, and the physics of levitating multi-ton blocks with sound alone remain daunting. Yet proponents argue the ancients may not have needed to lift entire blocks, only to reduce their effective weight or friction, making them easier to drag or position. A slight edge, multiplied across millions of stones, could transform the impossible into the possible. The idea of vibration extends beyond sound. Some suggest the Egyptians harnessed mechanical vibration, simple devices like tuned rods, pendulums, or plates, to create resonance in stone. Experiments today show that even small vibrations can make heavy objects easier to move by reducing static friction. Did the Egyptians discover this by accident, then refine it into method? A team of workers, stomping or hammering in rhythm, could perhaps loosen a block enough to slide it into place. What makes these theories compelling is not proof, but possibility. Ancient cultures everywhere revered sound. The Om of India, the chanting of monks, the trumpets of Jericho said to bring down walls, all suggest a universal intuition that sound shapes reality. For us, it is ritual. For them, perhaps it was also technology. The pyramids themselves seem to invite such speculation. Their chambers hum, their stones echo, their geometry resonates with astronomical cycles. Perhaps we are reading too much into coincidence, or perhaps the Egyptians encoded not only stone and star, but sound itself into their design.
and a reminder that vibration was their forgotten tool. If true, the implications are extraordinary. It would mean the ancients knew how to manipulate physical forces with precision we barely grasp today. It would mean the pyramids were not only tombs or monuments, but instruments, vast resonant machines humming with power, their stones tuned to the frequencies of earth and sky. Whether true or not, the acoustic and vibration theories capture imagination because they bridge science and myth. They suggest a world where the boundary between ritual and engineering was porous, where chants and drums were not just ceremonies, but technologies. A world where the pyramids were built not only with stone, but with sound.
Among the puzzles of the pyramids, none is sharper than the stone itself. Limestone forms most of the bulk, soft enough for copper chisels and dolerite pounders. But within the heart of Khufu's pyramid lie chambers of granite, stone so hard that it challenges even modern steel. These blocks were quarried in Aswan, 500 miles away, weighing up to 80 tons apiece. They were not left rough, they were carved, polished, and fitted with extraordinary precision. How, with copper chisels that bend on contact with granite, could this have been done? The orthodox answer is patience. Dolerite pounders, thousands of blows, sand and water as abrasives. Experiments show it is possible, yet possible does not silence doubt. The precision of the granite beams above the king's chamber, the smoothness of sarcophagi cut from single blocks, the deep drill holes with spiral tool marks, all suggest methods more efficient than pounding and abrasion. This gap gives rise to one of the most intriguing ideas: lost metallurgy. Metallurgy is the mother of technology. Control of fire, smelting of ores, forging of alloys. Each leap reshaped civilization. The Egyptians, we are told, had only copper and later bronze. Iron would come centuries later. But what if their mastery was greater than we believe? What if they experimented with alloys now forgotten, harder than copper, capable of cutting granite like butter? Legends hint at this. Arab chroniclers in the Middle Ages wrote of magic metal used by the ancients, tools that shattered stone without breaking. Some spoke of liquid fire poured into cracks, splitting rock with ease. Were these merely stories, or echoes of techniques lost when dynasties crumbled? Even today, ancient metallurgy puzzles us. The iron pillar of Delhi resists rust after 1,600 years. Roman concrete, stronger than ours in seawater, was forgotten until recently rediscovered. Damascus steel, with its legendary sharpness, vanished for centuries. Why assume Egypt, with its genius for stone and symbol, left us no similar mystery? Fragments tempt speculation. In 2016, archaeologists discovered that some Egyptian chisels were not pure copper, but arsenical bronze, an alloy harder than copper alone. Other finds suggest early experiments with meteoric iron, literally forged from the stars. Could specialized tools, made from rare alloys, have been reserved for pyramid construction? If so, they may have been rare, guarded, and easily lost to history. A handful of tools, scattered, would leave little trace after millennia. Another possibility is chemical. Some researchers propose that the Egyptians used a form of geopolymer, casting stones rather than cutting them. In this view, granite-like blocks may have been poured as liquid slurry, hardened in molds. The precision, then, is not cutting, but casting. Mainstream scholars remain skeptical, but laboratory tests on pyramid stones show unusual microstructures, suggesting some may indeed have been artificially formed. If true, this would be a forgotten alchemy of stone, metallurgy extended to geology. Lost metallurgy need not mean sci-fi alloys or magic.
It may simply mean knowledge misplaced. A recipe for bronze stronger than we assume. A technique for heat-treating tools. A method of combining abrasives with metal tips. To us, with steel saws and diamond drills, such methods seem primitive. But to them, they may have been revolutionary, enabling feats we now dismiss as impossible. Skeptics ask, where are these tools? Why no caches, no workshops preserved? Yet, absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. Egypt's deserts swallowed cities whole. Papyrus decays. Wood rots. Bronze corrodes. A handful of rare tools passed among elites could vanish completely, leaving only stone as testimony. And the stone, stubbornly, still whispers of precision. Lost metallurgy captures imagination because it bridges credibility and wonder. It does not claim extraterrestrial beams or mystical chants, but human craft, clever, practical, and now forgotten. It reminds us that history is not a straight line upward. It is a maze, with pathways explored and abandoned, secrets discovered and lost. The pyramids may be not only monuments to kings, but monuments to a technology we can no longer replicate. If that is true, then each granite beam in the king's chamber is more than architecture. It is evidence. Evidence that humanity once wielded tools or techniques we cannot yet name. Evidence that even in the Bronze Age, our ancestors may have touched an industrial brilliance that crumbled into silence.
The Nile is the lifeblood of Egypt. Every year it floods, depositing silt that feeds crops, shaping the rhythm of civilization itself. Without the river, the pyramids could never have been built, at least in terms of feeding and transporting workers. But some researchers wonder, what if the Nile's waters were more than sustenance and highway? What if they were also the hidden engines of pyramid construction? The theory of hydraulic power begins with transport. The granite beams for the king's chamber came from Aswan, more than 500 miles upriver. Barges carried them downstream, massive rafts guided by currents and sails. But what happened once they reached Giza? Archaeological evidence suggests canals and harbors once extended to the base of the plateau, allowing ships to dock almost at the foot of the pyramids. If so, the Egyptians did not drag 80-ton stones across miles of desert. They floated them on water, harnessing buoyancy rather than brute force. But water may have played a role even in lifting the blocks. Imagine a system of basins and locks, like a primitive canal system, raising stones step by step with controlled floods. As water rose, buoyant rafts carried blocks upward. Drain the water, build the next level, and repeat. Such a method would leave little trace, for channels and wooden devices would vanish under sand and time. Yet the logic is enticing. Why build ramps miles long when water, already flowing at your doorstep, can do the lifting? Hydraulics could also explain certain architectural mysteries. Some passages within the Great Pyramid show signs of having been flooded or pressurized. The subterranean chamber, carved deep into bedrock, may have served as a hydraulic pump chamber. Fringe theorists propose that the pyramid itself functioned as a massive water pump, channeling Nile water through internal shafts to generate pressure. Whether true or not, the idea highlights how little we understand of the pyramid's inner workings. There is precedent for such ingenuity. Ancient engineers across the world used water in astonishing ways. The Romans built aqueducts stretching for miles, delivering water with precision gradients. The Nabateans of Petra carved entire hydraulic systems into cliffs. In China, irrigation channels regulated floods centuries before the pyramids rose.
why should Egypt not have harnessed water with equal genius? One of the strongest pieces of evidence comes from reliefs and texts showing boats carrying colossal statues and obelisks. These are not fantasy, they are records. The Egyptians mastered buoyancy and transport on a scale rarely appreciated. Extending that mastery into pyramid construction requires only imagination, not alien intervention. Still, skeptics demand proof. No hydraulic locks have been found, no preserved channels inside the pyramids. Archaeologists prefer ramps. They leave clearer evidence, and water lifting seems speculative. Yet absence of evidence may reflect the fragility of the material. Channels dug into mud brick or wood would erode, vanish, or be repurposed over millennia. Stones remain, waterworks dissolve. What makes the hydraulic theory compelling is its elegance. Water equalizes labor. A dozen men can float a block that 100 could not drag. A system of canals, basins, and locks would reduce the pyramid's construction from miracle to method. It requires no lasers, no anti-gravity, only water, gravity's gentlest ally. And yet, the thought lingers. Did the Egyptians guard such knowledge deliberately? Did they see water not only as sacred, but as secret, its power to lift stone considered divine? If so, when their civilization declined, the technique may have been lost, drowned in memory. The pyramids would remain, but the water that raised them would flow on, leaving no trace but whispers. If true, then the Nile was not only Egypt's vein of life, but its hidden muscle. Each pyramid was a monument carved not only by stone and sweat, but by the silent strength of water. Forgotten technology may not always be exotic. Sometimes it is simple, profound, and lost precisely because it was ordinary to those who used it.
For most archaeologists, the pyramids are tombs, grandiose houses of eternity for kings who wished to live forever. Yet to others, they are something more. Not graves, but machines. Among the boldest theories is the electricity hypothesis. The idea that the Great Pyramid was not built merely to house the dead, but to generate and transmit energy. The seed of this notion lies in design. The Great Pyramid is not a solid block of stone. It is riddled with chambers, shafts, and passageways whose functions remain mysterious. Some shafts align with stars, but others seem oddly angled or purposeless. The king's chamber, lined with granite rich in quartz, resonates at specific frequencies, almost like a tuning box. The pyramid itself once gleamed with polished limestone casing, highly reflective, capped, some say, with electrum, a conductive gold-silver alloy. Taken together, these features resemble not a tomb, but a circuit. Proponents argue that the pyramid may have been built to harness natural energies. The Nile, flowing nearby, could have provided a source of kinetic power. Water coursing through subterranean chambers may have created vibrations, charging the quartz-rich granite. Electromagnetic energy, funneled through the pyramid's structure, could then be transmitted upward through the capstone, radiating into the sky. In this view, the pyramid was a massive energy plant, pulsing with power. Fringe theorists point to artifacts like the so-called Baghdad Battery, clay jars with copper and iron fittings capable of producing small electric currents. Though discovered far from Egypt and centuries later, they prove that ancient peoples experimented with electrochemistry. At Dendera, temple reliefs appear to show bulb-like objects connected by cables, interpreted by some as representations of electric lamps.
Mainstream scholars dismiss these interpretations, but the allure remains. What if ancient engineers discovered ways to produce and channel electricity long before Benjamin Franklin flew his kite? Even if not electricity in the modern sense, the pyramid as power plant theory suggests some form of energy manipulation. Some researchers note that the pyramid's shape itself focuses energy. Measurements reveal unusual electromagnetic properties around the pyramid, though skeptics attribute these to environmental factors. Could the pyramid have been deliberately designed to amplify natural forces, whether for power, healing, or ritual? The implications are staggering. If the Great Pyramid was a generator, its purpose might not have been to bury kings at all, but to fuel civilization, powering lights, tools, or technologies we can only guess at. Imagine temples lit not by oil lamps, but by a steady glow. Imagine machinery driven not by slaves, but by current. The pyramid then would not be a tombstone of stone, but a battery of the gods. Of course, mainstream archaeology resists this idea. No wires, no lamps, no machines have been found in Giza. The so-called Dendera light relief is explained as a lotus flower and snake, a symbolic depiction of creation, not a lamp. The Baghdad battery may have been used for electroplating, not lighting. To skeptics, the power plant theory is fantasy projected onto stone. Yet even skeptics admit that we do not fully understand the pyramids. No mummy has ever been found inside the Great Pyramid. Its chambers are strangely austere, lacking inscriptions common in tombs. The sheer effort required to build it seems out of proportion for a burial alone. Why would a civilization invest so much in structures that, if purely tombs, were quickly robbed and emptied? The possibility that they served another purpose, whether ritual, astronomical, or energetic, cannot be dismissed entirely. The electricity hypothesis thrives because it dares to suggest that the ancients were not just primitive masons, but engineers of forces we barely grasp. It reframes the pyramid not as a relic of death, but as a beacon of life, a machine humming in stone. Even if false, it captures the sense that the pyramids were more than graves, that they were experiments, messages, or engines of forgotten power. And so the question remains, what if? What if the Great Pyramid once shone with light, its capstone glowing against the desert sky, not as a symbol of kingship, but as proof of an ancient science? What if the pyramids are not monuments to the dead, but monuments to energy, a science we once knew and then forgot?
The pyramids of Giza rise from the desert as symbols of Egyptian genius, yet the idea persists that their builders may not have been Egyptians alone. Perhaps they inherited knowledge from an older source, an advanced civilization lost to time. This theory, controversial and alluring, suggests the pyramids are not the beginning of architectural history, but the echo of something far older. The first clue lies in timing. Egypt's civilization seems to have emerged suddenly, fully formed. Around 3100 BCE, writing, monumental architecture, mathematics, and organized religion appear in tandem. To Orthodox historians, this is the result of centuries of gradual development, much of it hidden from view in fragmentary evidence. But to others, it feels abrupt, as though knowledge arrived from elsewhere, already mature. The pyramids, built so early in Egyptian history, seem too advanced to be the product of trial and error. Did the Egyptians inherit secrets from a forgotten predecessor? The second clue is global. Pyramids are not unique to Egypt. Across the world, cultures built similar structures. The ziggurats of Mesopotamia,
the step pyramids of Mesoamerica, the truncated pyramids of China. Even on remote islands like Sardinia and the Canary Islands, pyramid-like constructions appear. These societies were separated by oceans, with no known contact, yet they converged on the same shape, a mountain of stone rising toward the sky. Coincidence or shared inheritance? Some propose a lost civilization, the proverbial Atlantis, or something like it, whose knowledge spread after a cataclysm. Survivors, bearing fragments of science and architecture, seeded early cultures with tools and techniques. In this view, Egypt was not the origin, but the beneficiary, carrying forward a torch lit by hands long vanished. The pyramids would then be less tombs than time capsules, preserving knowledge against oblivion. Ancient Egyptian texts themselves hint at older builders. Priests in the Ptolemaic period spoke of Zep-Tepi, the first time, an age when gods walked the earth and founded civilization. Were these gods divine beings, or simply memories of ancestors whose knowledge seemed godlike? Could Zep-Tepi refer to an actual prehistoric culture, remembered dimly in myth? Even Herodotus, the Greek historian who visited Egypt in the 5th century BCE, recorded tales from priests who spoke of dynasties stretching back 17,000 years. Mainstream scholars dismiss these numbers as symbolic exaggerations, but what if they contain fragments of truth? What if Egyptian civilization rests on a foundation far older than we admit? Evidence is tantalizing but elusive. Erosion patterns on the Sphinx suggest water damage, possibly from rains that ended thousands of years before dynastic Egypt. If true, the Sphinx, and perhaps the pyramids, could be far older than convention allows. At sites like Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, monumental architecture now dates back to 9,500 BCE, millennia before the pyramids. If hunter-gatherers could build such structures, why not imagine a lost society capable of even greater feats? Skeptics counter that the similarities of pyramids worldwide stem from simple necessity. Pyramids are stable shapes, built high with stone, and the result is triangular. No diffusion is needed, only parallel invention. Egypt's pyramids, they argue, are entirely homegrown, the product of ambition, organization, and centuries of experimentation from mastabas to step pyramids to the perfection of Giza. The lost builders are a mirage born of our desire for mystery. Yet the idea endures because it fills a gap. The pyramids appear early, already magnificent. Their construction demands knowledge of surveying, logistics, and astronomy that seems to outpace their time. If that knowledge did not originate in Egypt, then perhaps it was inherited. If not Atlantis, then some precursor culture, whose traces lie buried beneath seas or sands. The Builders Beyond Egypt theory does not deny Egyptian genius. It amplifies it. It imagines the pharaohs as heirs, guardians of a legacy, preserving techniques from an older world. The pyramids are then not only monuments to Khufu, but monuments to memory itself, bridging epochs with stone. And perhaps that is why the idea captivates. To believe the pyramids were built with forgotten technology is one thing. To believe that technology came from a vanished civilization is another. A narrative that unites myths of Atlantis, flood legends, and scattered ruins into a single story. Humanity has risen before, and fallen, and may again.
In Egypt, nothing was built without the gods. Every stone laid, every temple raised, every pyramid aligned was an act of devotion. To the ancients, architecture was not only engineering, but theology in stone. The gods were not abstract. They were teachers, guardians, and sometimes the very source of knowledge. If the pyramids were built with forgotten technology,
Perhaps that knowledge was remembered in the only way the Egyptians knew how, through their gods. Consider Thoth, the god of wisdom, writing, and measurement. Often depicted with the head of an ibis, Thoth was credited with inventing hieroglyphs, mathematics, astronomy, and architecture. In myth, he weighed the hearts of the dead. But in life, he may have symbolized the precision of surveying and calculation. Could Thoth have been the memory of an ancient engineer, elevated to divinity, his practical tools transfigured into symbols of divine instruments? Or take Ra, the sun god, whose daily journey across the sky was the clock by which Egyptians measured their lives. The pyramids themselves were solar monuments, their sides angled to mirror the rays of the sun, their layout reflecting celestial order. If forgotten technology was employed, perhaps that knowledge was framed as a gift from Ra, the light of knowledge descending with the light of the sun. Osiris, lord of the underworld, is another key. Some traditions claimed the pyramids were not tombs for pharaohs, but symbolic resurrection machines, linking kings with Osiris in eternal rebirth. If so, then whatever techniques or tools were used would not have been described as technology, but as divine ritual. What we see as engineering may have been cloaked in the language of gods. Egyptian texts speak of the Zep Tepi, the first time, when gods walked the earth and established the foundations of civilization. In these myths, the gods handed down knowledge of writing, of architecture, of laws to humanity. Skeptics call this metaphor, but what if it is memory? What if the gods were ancestral figures, perhaps the bearers of lost technology from an earlier age, remembered as divine because their knowledge was incomprehensible? The blending of religion and technology is not unique to Egypt. In Greece, Hephaestus forged divine weapons. In India, the god Vishwakarma was the architect of the universe, builder of palaces and cities for gods and men. In Mesoamerica, Quetzalcoatl was both a god and a bringer of science and craft. Again and again, ancient peoples personified knowledge as divinity, perhaps because to them, technology was not separate from the sacred. It was sacred. The pyramids themselves reflect this fusion. They were aligned with stars not out of curiosity, but because the heavens were divine. Their geometries were sacred mathematics, their chambers symbolic cosmology. Yet the same alignments and geometries also demonstrate practical knowledge of surveying, astronomy, and engineering. To the Egyptians, there was no line between the two. To build with forgotten technology would not have felt like science to them, but like communion with the gods. This explains why no manuals survive. If techniques were recorded, they would have been framed as rituals, not blueprints. A chant may have encoded instructions for resonance. A hymn may have preserved astronomical alignments. A myth about Thoth weighing hearts may have symbolized precise measurement. What we dismiss as religion may conceal engineering. To us, gods are myth. To the Egyptians, they were memory. If we strip away the wings and animal heads, we may glimpse the shadows of real figures, engineers, astronomers, surveyors, whose knowledge became immortal through worship. The role of the gods in pyramid building may simply be the Egyptian way of saying, we had knowledge, we revered it, and then we forgot. And so the gods remain. Thoth with his stylus and scales, Ra blazing across the sky, Osiris resurrected in eternal cycles. To the believer, they are divine. To the historian, they are symbols. To the dreamer, they may be something else, the last guardians of a forgotten science, remembered in myth because stone endured, but knowledge slipped away.
Knowledge is fragile. A single war, a single fire, a single lost library can erase centuries of progress. But sometimes knowledge is not lost by accident. It is hidden, guarded by those who fear or revere its power. When it comes to the pyramids, one unsettling possibility is that their methods were deliberately concealed,
restricted to a small circle of priests and builders who carried their secrets to the grave. Ancient Egypt was a society of castes and mysteries. Priests mediated between humans and gods. Scribes controlled writing. Architects and masons served the pharaoh's vision. Knowledge was not democratic, it was hierarchical. The deeper the wisdom, the smaller the circle who possessed it. To know how to align a pyramid with the stars, or how to cut granite with precision, was not everyday skill. It was sacred privilege. This culture of secrecy is evident in other traditions. The rituals of embalming were guarded so closely that even today we reconstruct them from fragments. The recipes for sacred paints and resins were whispered from master to apprentice, never written down. The names of gods were hidden, revealed only to initiates. Why assume pyramid building techniques were any different? To the Egyptians, they were not mere construction tricks, but holy mysteries. Heka, a word that means both magic and science. Some scholars suggest the Guild of Builders may have operated like a secret order, preserving techniques through oral tradition. If so, the fall of a dynasty or the disruption of priestly lines could erase the chain of transmission. A method once known to a few could vanish forever, leaving monuments but no manuals. The pyramids themselves may be the only textbook that survived, a stone record without words. Even within Egypt, knowledge may have been compartmentalized. Workers in the quarries knew how to cut stone, but not how it was set. Haulers knew how to drag blocks, but not how they were lifted. Priests knew the alignments, but not the engineering. Only a handful at the top might have seen the full picture. Such compartmentalization ensured secrecy, but it also meant the knowledge was brittle. Break the chain and the puzzle collapses. This secrecy may explain why no records exist. Egyptians carved hymns, king lists, and daily accounts on stone, but not the blueprints of pyramid construction. To them, it was not mundane knowledge to be shared, but sacred technology to be guarded. Perhaps to reveal it would have been sacrilege, a violation of the divine order. When dynasties fell, invaders came and temples crumbled. The secrecy became silence. The idea resonates with other traditions. Medieval stonemasons guarded their craft so jealously that modern Freemasonry traces its symbolism to them. Alchemists cloaked their recipes in riddles, fearing misuse. Even in modern times, states guard technologies, nuclear, digital, biological, as secrets of power. Knowledge has always been currency, and those who hold it have always hidden it. What if the pyramid builders did the same? What if they knew techniques that made the impossible possible, but kept them as mysteries of the gods? In such a world, forgotten technology is not mysterious, it is inevitable. Any secret, held tightly enough, will vanish when its guardians die. This possibility changes how we see the pyramids. They may not only be monuments of stone, but monuments of secrecy, symbols of knowledge so sacred it was never meant for the masses. The silence of the pyramids, their knack of inscriptions, may itself be intentional, a mute testimony to power preserved in mystery. And so the question lingers. Was the technology lost because it was too advanced, or because it was too secret? Did the pharaohs intend their knowledge to endure, or did they guard it as fiercely as their tombs, ensuring it would vanish with them? Either way, the result is the same. We are left with stones that whisper of methods we cannot see, methods buried as surely as the kings they honored. The pyramids endure, but their instructions remain locked, not in papyrus or stone, but in silence. A silence cultivated by those who once held the secrets and carried them into eternity.
If the pyramids were built with simple tools and human effort alone, then surely we, with cranes, bulldozers, and computer modeling, should be able to replicate their methods with ease. And yet, every attempt to reconstruct their creation, whether by experiment or simulation, has exposed how elusive the truth remains. In the 1970s, a Japanese team sponsored by Nippon Television set out to build a small replica pyramid using what Egyptologists claimed were ancient techniques: copper chisels, wooden sledges, and ropes. The result was humbling. Workers could not cut granite with copper tools. They bent and dulled within minutes. They resorted to jackhammers and steel saws. When dragging blocks, the sledges sank into sand. Attempts to place blocks with primitive ramps ended in chaos. Eventually, cranes and trucks finished the job. The replica stood, but it was not Egyptian. It was modern machinery dressed as antiquity. Later, in the 1990s, engineer Mark Lehner and stonemason Roger Hopkins organized an experiment at Giza. They attempted to move limestone blocks with sledges across sand. The blocks stuck stubbornly until one worker poured water ahead of the sledge, moistening the sand. Suddenly, friction decreased dramatically. The blocks slid. This small discovery suggested an elegant solution to transport, but only for smaller blocks. Granite beams of 70 or 80 tons remained beyond reach. Other experiments have focused on ramps. French architect Jean-Pierre Houdin proposed an internal spiral ramp hidden inside the pyramid structure. Computer simulations showed it could work, and thermal scans of the Great Pyramid revealed anomalies consistent with hidden voids. Yet the theory remains unproven. No definitive spiral passage has been found. Straight ramps, meanwhile, would have required more material than the pyramid itself, making them impractical. The ramp question remains unsolved. Cutting stone remains equally problematic. Experimental archaeologists have shown that dolerite pounders can chip granite, given time, but the rate is painfully slow. To shape the granite beams for the king's chamber would have required years of pounding for each block. Copper drills, filled with sand as an abrasive, can indeed bore holes into granite, leaving spiral grooves. But replicating the speed and depth of ancient drill marks still eludes us. Were the Egyptians simply patient beyond modern imagination, or did they use tools we no longer understand? Modern reconstructions often succeed only by scaling down. Building a pyramid 20 feet tall with primitive tools is possible. Building one 480 feet tall is another matter. Scaling up magnifies every difficulty: logistics, precision, manpower. What works in a laboratory or a small field project collapses under the weight of millions of stones. The Egyptians did not build models, they built mountains. Even the alignment poses challenges. Surveying tools like the Merkit, a simple sighting instrument, and plumb bobs can achieve surprising accuracy. Yet the Great Pyramid is aligned to true north within 3 arc minutes, an error so small it rivals modern compasses. How, without telescopes or steel instruments, did they achieve this? Experimental archaeologists can replicate aspects of the feat, but the scale and consistency of Egyptian results remain unmatched. These modern attempts reveal 2 truths. First, the pyramids were not impossible. With clever techniques, water lubrication, sand abrasion, ramps, and levers, stones can be cut, moved, and set. The Egyptians were ingenious. But second, they expose how thin our certainty is. Every solution raises new questions. Why no ramp remnants large enough to match the Great Pyramid?
Why granite chambers cut with precision beyond patient pounding? Why logistics that demand nearly miraculous efficiency? Failures in this sense are valuable. They remind us that we do not know everything. They reveal that even with computers and cranes, we struggle to explain what Bronze Age builders achieved with bare hands. Either they were more patient, more organized, and more disciplined than we imagine, or they knew something we do not. And so, modern reconstructions both vindicate and undermine orthodox views. They prove the pyramids could have been built without alien magic, but also highlight how little we understand the subtleties of method. Somewhere between ramps and resonance, chisels and forgotten tools lies the truth. But until someone builds a Great Pyramid again with Bronze Age technology and succeeds, the question lingers.
Suppose for a moment the radical idea is correct. Suppose the Great Pyramids were not built with sledges and ramps alone, but with technologies or techniques lost to time. Hydraulic lifts, alloys harder than bronze, acoustic resonance, or even something stranger. What would this mean for history, for science, for us? The first implication is humbling. Human progress is not linear. We like to think of history as a staircase, each century climbing higher, each generation knowing more than the last. But if forgotten technology lies buried in the pyramids, then history is not a staircase, but a circle. Civilizations rise, discover, lose, and rise again. Egypt may not have been primitive at all, but the custodian of knowledge inherited from a deeper past. If so, then our modern pride and progress may be arrogance, built on amnesia. The second implication concerns the fragility of knowledge. Imagine that the Egyptians did discover methods of lifting, cutting, or powering beyond what we credit them for. Where are those methods now? Gone. Not because they were false, but because knowledge can vanish as easily as papyrus burns, as dynasties collapse, as priesthoods are slain. The pyramids would then stand as warnings. Even the greatest feats can outlast the instructions that made them. Stone endures. Memory does not. Third, it would alter archaeology itself. For decades, Egyptology has framed the pyramids as tombs, monuments to pharaonic ego. If forgotten technology was involved, the pyramids might be reinterpreted as more than graves. They would become machines of memory, repositories of science disguised as religion, engineering cloaked in myth. Every chamber, every angle, every alignment would need to be reread, not as ritual alone, but as encoded technology. The religious implications would be equally seismic. Myths of gods granting knowledge, of a Zep-Tepi, or first time when wisdom was handed down, might be seen not as allegory, but as memory. Thoth, Ra, Osiris, figures of myth, could be reimagined as personifications of lost science. Religious texts across cultures that speak of forgotten ages, cataclysms, or divine engineers might suddenly gain new weight. Faith would not be disproved, it would be reframed. Science itself would be shaken. If ancient engineers knew principles we have lost, resonance, metallurgy, energy, then our current knowledge is not a ceiling, but a rediscovery. Perhaps modern physics is not the first to probe vibration, not the first to tap into electromagnetic phenomena. Perhaps we are merely recovering what others once wielded. The pyramids would become not only historical puzzles, but scientific textbooks carved in limestone. Culturally, the impact would be electrifying. Imagine the world's reaction if credible evidence emerged, a tool forged of unknown alloy, a chamber functioning as a hydraulic pump, an inscription describing energy harnessed from the earth. The pyramids would cease to be
ancient tombs and become symbols of lost genius. Tourism would swell into pilgrimage. Scholars, engineers, and visionaries would swarm to Giza not to mourn the dead, but to resurrect forgotten science. But the implications extend further. If forgotten technology once existed, why was it lost? Did it collapse with its society? Was it hoarded by elites until it withered in secrecy? Was it too dangerous, deliberately erased? These questions would cast shadows over our own time. Are we too at risk of losing what we know? Our electricity, our medicine, our digital archives, if our civilization falters? The pyramids would become mirrors, showing us not only Egypt's grandeur, but our own fragility. And there is one more implication, perhaps the most unsettling. If the Egyptians possessed technology we cannot replicate, what else lies buried in time? What other inventions, sciences, or arts have risen and fallen before recorded history? The pyramids might be only the visible tip of a much larger iceberg, a reminder that human history is not measured only in what we preserve, but also in what we forget. Thus, if true, the pyramids would not only redefine Egypt, they would redefine us. They would tell us that our ancestors were not primitive, but profound, not ignorant, but ingenious. They would whisper that greatness can be lost, that we are not as unique as we believe, and that our civilization may too one day vanish, leaving future archaeologists to puzzle over our ruins. The implications of forgotten technology are not only about the past, they are about the future. The pyramids might not be monuments to kings, but monuments to knowledge itself. A reminder that power is fragile, memory fleeting, and that even stone can outlast the ideas that raised it.
Most people see the pyramids as triumphs, symbols of power, wealth, and engineering genius. But what if they are not only monuments of pride, but monuments of caution? What if their message is not, "Look what we achieved," but "Beware what can be lost"? Consider their design. The pyramids contain no detailed blueprints, no inscriptions explaining their construction. Unlike tombs in the Valley of the Kings, which teem with texts and paintings, the Great Pyramid is silent. Empty chambers, plain walls, immense stones. That silence may be the point. Perhaps the pyramid was not intended to instruct, but to endure. Not to tell how, but to insist, we were here. If the builders possessed knowledge now forgotten, then their greatest lesson may have been how fragile knowledge is. Papyrus crumbles, oral tradition dies with its keepers, tools rust, alloys corrode, wood rots. Even libraries, like Alexandria's, can vanish in a single fire. But stone endures. Build knowledge into stone, and it might whisper across millennia, even if the details are gone. The warning is stark. Greatness does not guarantee permanence. If Egypt once held secrets of metallurgy, hydraulics, or resonance, those secrets died with its priests and pharaohs. What remains are mute pyramids, their very impossibility mocking us. They say, you can achieve wonders, but wonders fade. Only memory in stone survives. This interpretation casts the pyramids in a new light. They are not simply tombs, nor merely experiments in architecture. They are markers, like colossal tombstones, not for kings, but for knowledge itself. Their size is not excess, but strategy, to ensure survival against time, conquest, and forgetfulness. The bigger the monument, the harder it is to erase. The warning reaches beyond Egypt. Civilizations across the world have fallen. Sumer, the Maya, the Indus Valley, each achieved brilliance. Each collapsed. Their sciences, their arts, their technologies are lost, save for fragments in clay and stone. The pyramids stand as the loudest of these fragments, shouting across ages, "Do not think yourself immune." For us, the message is unsettling. We live in an age of immense knowledge, stored not in stone, but in fragile media, hard drives, clouds, satellites. What happens when power grids fail, when archives corrupt, when networks vanish? In 1,000 years, will our skyscrapers be reduced to dust while the pyramids still stand? If so, what story will the future tell of us? That we were masters of machines, or fools who forgot how quickly machines fade? The pyramids as warnings force humility. They suggest that what we call progress is not inevitable, but fragile. They remind us that civilizations can stumble, that secrets can be lost, that the greatest structures of the mind can vanish faster than the greatest structures of stone. They tell us that permanence lies not in knowledge preserved on paper or screen, but in memory carved deep enough to resist time itself. And perhaps the pyramids are not only warnings, but challenges. They dare us to rediscover, to recover what was lost. To look at their stones and ask not how did they do it, but what do we risk forgetting? The builders may have left us no manual, but they left us a riddle. Solving it is less about reconstructing ramps or tools than about realizing what is at stake, that forgetting is the fate of all civilizations that fail to guard their knowledge. Thus, the pyramids are both monuments and mirrors. They celebrate human brilliance, but they also caution against arrogance. They endure not just as wonders of the world, but as warnings to the world. Do not assume your greatness will last. Build wisely, remember carefully, or you too will vanish, leaving only stone to tell your story.
The Great Pyramids stand where desert meets sky, immovable yet inscrutable. We measure them, scan them, probe their chambers, and still they keep their silence. After centuries of study, the question of how they were built remains unresolved, hovering between engineering and enigma. Perhaps that is the pyramids' truest power. They refuse to yield certainty. Orthodox archaeology insists the answer lies in human labor, ramps, sledges, and copper tools. Experimental reconstructions show that, with enough workers and patience, such methods can explain much. Yet doubts persist. The sheer weight of granite beams, the precision of cuts, the alignment with stars, each feels like a challenge hurled across time. Possible, yes, but sufficient? That is the open question. Alternative theories fill the gaps: lost metallurgy, hydraulic lifts, resonance and vibration, even the idea that the pyramids were power plants. Some theories drift into fantasy, others remain tantalizingly plausible. None are proven. Yet their persistence tells us something important. The pyramids invite speculation because they embody the unknown. They are too large to ignore, too silent to explain, too precise to dismiss. And so the debate rages. Were the pyramids tombs of kings, built with patience and rope? Or were they machines of memory, constructed with techniques we have forgotten? Were they the culmination of Egypt's brilliance, or the inheritance of an older, lost civilization? Each theory is a shard of truth, but the whole remains elusive. The open mystery matters because it humbles us. We pride ourselves on mastery of the world, skyscrapers, satellites, circuits. Yet in the shadow of the pyramids, we are reminded that the past may still outwit us. A civilization 4 millennia gone may have held secrets we no longer grasp. The arrogance of modernity dissolves before the stones of Giza. Perhaps that is the point.
The pyramids may not be puzzles to solve, but riddles to contemplate. Their builders may have intended them not as explanations, but as provocations. Structures so enduring that they force every generation to ask anew, how? Why? Who? In this way, the pyramids are not monuments to the past, but dialogues with the future. They speak not in words, but in silence, a silence so vast it demands our imagination. And perhaps imagination is the answer. The pyramids remind us that science and myth are not enemies, but partners. Myths give meaning, science gives method, and between them lies wonder. Whether built with forgotten technology or with nothing more than patience and rope, the pyramids accomplish the same feat. They make us feel small, awed, and curious. They force us to admit that mystery is not gone from the world. So the pyramids endure, stone mountains against the desert, riddles against time. They are tombs and not tombs, machines and not machines, mysteries and mirrors. They leave us not with answers, but with a question. What if? What if they knew more than we do? What if the knowledge is not lost, but waiting? What if the pyramids are not monuments to death, but monuments to memory? Reminders that greatness, once forgotten, can still be rediscovered. That is the open mystery. It does not close. It stands eternal, like the pyramids themselves.